Well, welcome to Divine Plays Interviews. And today we're meeting with Annika Hurwitt of OptimalWomen'sLeadership.com. And I'm excited to interview with Annika because she knew a guy named Sid Banks, who I think is just the cream of the cream, and brought a lot of pleasure in my life from reading his work and seeing his interviews. And I'm just thrilled that Annika can join us today. So thank you, Annika.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And in particular, I wonder just how you got into doing this work. How did you get here?
20 years ago, I had just gotten my doctorate in narrative psychology, and I was leaving the field. I had been a counselor for 10 years, and I just thought, there must be more to life than this. There must be more to life than fixing problems and getting people to a place where they're coping. I thought people were meant to thrive in life and be creative and be joyful. And so I was working with storytelling as kind of a healing modality, but I was struggling with a decision. I was trying to make a very big decision in my life. And I didn't know how you make a decision in a way that you can totally trust. And the advice that I got from people was, to me, inadequate. People would say, make a list of the pros and the cons and rate each one. And I just thought, that can't be where truth comes from. And as I was struggling with this, somebody recommended that I go to this seminar that George and Linda Pransky were giving in Boston. And I said, if it's anything to do with psychology, it won't help me with making this decision. Because I pretty much had studied, the conventional psychology, the spiritual psychology. And they said, you should just go. And for whatever reason, I did. And it was 4 days. And I was so struck by George and Linda's presence. They were the first therapists that I'd ever met who were happy, present, in love with each other, having a good time. And I thought, I need to learn this for me. I want to be happier. I want to be more present. And I'm not working with clients. I'm done with that, but I'm going to learn this for me. And so I started studying with them. I would fly out west and take their seminars and took intensives. And then little by little, the clients started coming back, and I started working with clients again. And I found that it did answer the question that I was looking for, which is, how do you know when thought is trustworthy? How do you know what's wisdom and what's not?
I was really struck and made a note of what you said about how do you know when thought is trustworthy. And that is so pertinent to the human experience, right? I mean, how do we know which thought that it comes up, and so many of them? I find myself wanting to ask you, so how do you know? How do you know when thought is trustworthy?
Well, that's one of the greatest gifts, I think, that the principles give us. And it's, for everybody, whether we're, like you said, whether as a mom we're trying to figure out common sense things, or as a leader trying to make big decisions. But really what the principles teach us is they're an understanding of how thought works, and that thought, whatever we think we're going to feel, and that our feelings will teach us about our thinking all the time. They teach us endlessly about our thinking. And so, when we have feelings of insecurity or worry or stress or anxiety, and then we look back to the source of that, which is thought, we see that we're thinking in ways that are anxious and stressed. And when we have feelings of ease and well-being, we realize that we're having more of a sense of flow with thought. So as our awareness builds around thought, it starts to just be natural to kind of back off from the thinking that creates stress for you. And as people do that, there's just a lot more space in our brains, because we do an enormous amount of thinking that creates stress and worry and unnecessary analysis and just what I call garbage thinking, recycled thinking, just a lot of unnecessary thinking. So as that settles down for people, we have what I call psychological open space, mental freedom, and insights start to come to people. And most people have had an experience of insight somewhere in their life. And many people have them, with some regularity when they bike or they shower or they run. But even those people who have insights with some regularity have it in just usually one little narrow part of their life where they finally let thought drop and allow their minds to clear. So that really narrows the flow of insights and wisdom that come. But when you're working with the principles and it becomes natural to see the unnecessariness of a lot of your thinking, you have more open space, those insights and wisdom flow in on a more regular basis. They come with a really nice feeling. And I always tell people, run the experiment, meaning see how they play out in your life. And people find that those thoughts tend to play out really well. Those tend to be thoughts that we can trust. And there's even research now that shows that when we're in a stressed state of mind, our IQ goes down. And when our mind is calm and open, our IQ goes up. So there's even research-based evidence now that what the thoughts that come with that calmer feeling, that nicer feeling, tend to have more intelligence behind them, and they're more trustworthy. So as people start experimenting with making decisions from there, they find out that they can really have confidence in those decisions.
That is such a beautiful description. It makes me think of couples who I work with who come in saying, she did this thing to me, she called me and she was yelling at me, and it's not right that she does that. I'm always fascinated by that because what's really upsetting them is their own feelings inside of them about what they think about that. What you said about when we allow that sort of quiet space to arise, when we step back from that thinking, that we have this opportunity for new insight to come. I mean, is that true have you seen that with couples? Are couples able to experience that?
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And the beautiful thing with couples is that connection and intimacy come from a state of presence. And, we're naturally present to each other when we first meet because we're really interested and attracted, and it kind of clears your head and makes you very present. And so frequently when people first meet, they go, oh, I just connect with this person so easily, And then that goes away over time, and our mental habits creep back in and our minds get busy. 90%, or at least 80% of what helps couples is getting back to that state of presence. And you start to have an appreciation for this psychological open space, that it's actually something to value. And for many people, that's new learning. Because even though we're like that as kids, which is when, learning curve is highest, when we're most joyful, we connect the most easily with others. Once you're certainly in our culture and in many cultures, as we grow up, it's more what we see for role models are people that are busy all the time in their minds. And we even associate stress, and busyness with responsibility. It's a red herring because that role modeling is the reason why so many Americans have issues with stress. In fact, the ultimate position of responsibility, meaning the capacity to respond, is a state of presence with not a lot going on in your head. And that the less we overwork our minds, the sharper our minds become. So the more capable our minds are when we use them. I think I once heard George Pransky say, the mind's like a self-sharpening blade. When you rest it, it gets sharper. And so the ultimate position of responsibility is to let thought drop, to have open space, to be present to life as it's unfolding in the moment, and to use thought as needed.
That's so different than when I was with my ex-husband. We were separating. We went to a therapist and we talked about everything. And every bad thing had to be taken out and worked and felt and moved. The idea was that if we didn't talk through all of this and we didn't feel these things, then, we were never going to get through it.
Yeah.
But I have to say, in retrospect, it didn't seem like we ever got through it.
Of course, the mind's going to keep doing whatever you train it to do. So as it will keep generating more problems, especially in problem-focused therapy, because we're training our mind. Okay, we'll come up with some problems and then work on them. Well, the mind is very trainable, and it will get in that habit. It'll do it all day long if you keep encouraging it. And then if there's no one at the driver's seat who understands about mind, consciousness, and thought and how the brain works and where experience comes from, no one will be coaching you to say, by the way, you ought to also stop thinking of problems and let your mind do what nature's designed it to do, which is to rest and let thoughts just roll through and, smell the flowers and notice that it's 3 o'clock and it's a gray day, and let the goodness of that moment touch you, because that's really where the goodies in life are in that present moment.
How do they do that?
How do they do that question? Well, it's one of those things that those of us who teach the principles find ourselves saying over and over again, is that it's, the principles, in a way, they're like a hologram. They describe the workings of how we have psychological and spiritual experience. So they're kind of infinite in what they teach us. And as people begin to hear this, they usually need to hear it 7 or 8 times before it sinks in. But that it's just really waking up to understanding that thought is creating your feeling in every moment. So that waking up happens for individuals and couples differently, because everybody's different. And that's what keeps the work so fascinating. But some people are very attuned to their feelings. And so they start to say, it's natural for them to notice their feelings as they go throughout the day. And as they learn that the only place their feeling can come from is thought.